Yo, what's good, guys? This is Chris coming at you live again with another Sonic video discussion, and I think that this is an important one to have. I'm here to say something that is kind of a hot take about a game that I thought was a great addition to the franchise at the time. I think, looking at the direction the series has gone in the last few years, it's fair to say that in retrospective, this was really an underrated gem. I'm talking about Sonic Heroes. Yes, Sonic Heroes. One of my favorite 3D Sonic titles growing up, and really the game that got me into this series in general. I think the reviews are somewhat mixed on this game. Metacritic gave it a 72 and an 8 out of 10 based off of user feedback. So overall, it was received with mixed feedback, and many people may actually say this game is where the 3D game started to take a dive. I completely disagree with that and think this game is extremely good, actually. This game doesn't really draw the hottest of takes or inspire the fiercest of discussions, so I think it's actually the perfect game to talk about for the 30th anniversary. I think this game is an underrated gem. This is a game that followed some of the most beloved 3D titles, which were the adventure games, and while it had similar gameplay objectives, they switched up the gameplay style to something that's very unique, but it's still an optimal experience. This game knew exactly what it wanted to be, how it wanted to execute it, and did it extremely well in my opinion. After picking it up for the first time in maybe 16 or 17 years, I can definitely say that this game is very good, and I had a ton of fun replaying this game to completion. Today, I'm going to give you guys a little retrospective on the game by dissecting gameplay elements, storytelling, marketing, and various other topics to give you a true perspective on why I believe this game is an underrated gem. So let's start with a quick story on the development before we get into things, as well as the marketing. The game follows sometime after the events of Sonic Adventure 2. It was actually stated at one point in time the game was believed to be Sonic Adventure 3. And unfortunately, that never happened. We all wish that was the case, but Yuji Naka wanted to go into a different direction and appeal to new fans of the series. He didn't want to only appeal to Sonic fans, so he tried to boost the IP by drawing in an entirely new audience. And it definitely worked. At the time, I was a diehard Mario fan, but boy, when this game came out, I was instantly hooked on the franchise. One thing that separates this game from a lot of the things you see in the current age of Sonic was the amazing marketing cycle for this game. They had McDonald's commercials followed up by a Happy Meal toy line, a lot of other commercials amongst other things, and they just really promoted this game very well. I didn't know what Sonic was until I saw these ads on TV, and believe me, these ads got me hooked in the franchise and probably got a good ROI in terms of money I spent on Sonic products following in the upcoming years. This game may have had a different tone than the adventure games, but it still captured the spirit and characterization of Sonic to a T. The gameplay features a new team-based gimmick where there's 3 playable characters at once. One is a speed character, one is a flying character, and one is a more combat-based power character. At the time, this was seen as a revolutionary gimmick because this game has some of the most playable characters we've ever seen in a platformer. I'll save the rest about gameplay further on in the video, so we'll talk a little bit about the story before getting into that. The plot of the game follows 4 different teams of 3 Sonic characters, the most infamous being Team Sonic, featuring the original trio of Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles. This was meant to be the definitive experience for returning players to the series. The story starts out following Sonic running around on his own when Tails and Knuckles approach him with a letter from Dr. Eggman saying he will conquer the world in 3 days. Sonic and Knuckles assure Tails that this will be no problem and they speed off to start the adventure. Sonic and the gang speed through a few levels where they take on Dr. Eggman and defeat him pretty easily. They then enter a new city under his control next, where after 2 levels they stumble upon Team Rose, who is looking for them for unknown reasons. After defeating them, they head into the casino zone where it's revealed they only have 24 hours left to save the world. They speed through a few levels, fight an army of Eggman robots as the boss battle, and then move on to a rail canyon where they confront Eggman again, only to find out he's a fake. This is where a Neo Metal Sonic sneakily appears and copies all their data unknowingly to them. This kind of reveals a plot that's going on behind the scenes of the main conflict, so it's something to keep an eye out for later on. So after that, they follow Dr. Eggman through the Frog Forest, and they speed through 2 more levels where they actually end up finding Team Dark. Team Dark confronts them, and they actually end up battling. After a little scuffle, they defeat Team Dark, and it's actually revealed that Shadow doesn't even remember any of the trio. After defeating them, they follow Shadow and Eggman through a haunted castle and fight another Eggman robot army at the end of the 2 levels that they face, and then they move on to the Egg Fleet. They speed through 2 more levels, which I think are actually the best levels in the game, and then they finally take on the final robot, which is the Egg Emperor. They eventually take him out and also take out all the battleships in the fleet. And that's how Team Sonic's story ends. While this plot is a far cry from the cinematic movie type plot in SA2, it serves as a good medium between the people who don't want serious plots and people who do. There are stakes at play, and the team needs to work together to save the day. The characterization is very good for Sonic. I think they perfectly capture his essence while still making him feel cool. Growing up, this version of Sonic just seems so badass to me. I also think Ryan Drummond absolutely nails his role in this game, and this is by far his most impressive performance as Sonic. And it's probably better than anything Roger Craig Smith has ever done for Sonic. Maybe I'm just being biased, but I really feel like he just does such an amazing job in this game. So Amy finds Sonic at the end and chases after him, and that's the end of Team Sonic's story. The plot and story arc is very similar across the other teams, so I won't go too in depth when discussing those stories. The next story that we're going to cover is Team Dark. It consists of Shadow, Rouge, and newcomer E123 Omega, who seems to be similar to E102 Gamma. There is actually some depth into the story as far as character development goes, so that is actually respectable. This is also considered to be the hard mode for the more experienced players as well. But anyways, let's get into the story for the sake of time. Rouge sneaks into one of Eggman's bases to look for treasure. She ends up finding Shadow, who is presumed to be dead after the events of SA2. Shadow has no recollection of anything, and she also awakens E123 Omega, who attacks Shadow. Rouge breaks up the fight and tells them to unite against the common enemy, which is Eggman. They serve as the anti-heroes in the story. The order is exactly the same in the story as far as levels and boss fights goes, except after the Grand Metropolis City, they actually run into Team Chaotix instead of Team Rose like Team Sonic did. Then they speed through the Carnival Zone, fight the same boss, and then they move on to the Rail Canyon and take on an underground base in the next 2 levels. After they defeat the Eggman copy, Metal Sonic comes and copies all their data, and eventually they find Team Sonic in a frog forest and fight them as well. They go through the next 4 zones together, and Shadow, who is determined to figure out who he is, claims towards the end that he does not care and he will always be the ultimate life form. They eventually take down the Egg Emperor, the story ends, and Rouge finds the hidden treasure of Eggman. It turns out to be an army of Shadow robots that have been cloned. Rouge cracks a couple jokes with Shadow at the end, and then she takes off to seal the Master Emerald, and that's how the story ends. The next story I'm going to talk about is Team Rose. It consists of Big the Cat, Amy Rose, and Cream the Rabbit. This is considered to be the easy mode for new players to the franchise, and every level is the same, and it's in the same exact order, so basically there's not much to cover with this story, so I won't really talk too much about it. It starts off on the beach where Amy is searching for Sonic in a newspaper. Big the Cat's friend Froggy is missing again, and Cheese's lost brother Chicola is missing as well. They believe that Sonic took it and based off the newspaper, but it turns out to actually be Metal Sonic. So they set off across all of the levels, all the team fights, and all the boss battles, and then they defeat the Egg Emperor, and at the end, everyone is reunited. Amy chases after Sonic, but at the end, Metal Sonic copies the Chaos data from Froggy after beating the final boss. Other than that, nothing really changes too much between these stories. That's why I really wanted to just fly through this one. The next story is Team Chaotix. Team Chaotix is at their detective agency where they get a sketchy random package with a client who is willing to pay them handsomely for completing the exact same story as the other characters. I mean, doing missions to make money. I guess they're broke, or I'm not really sure. I don't know. I didn't like this story. Most people don't like this story. Anyways, they speed through the levels, fight the 2 teams, the Robot Storms, beat the Egg Fleet, and then fight the Egg Emperor, who was proven to be a fake at the end. The sketchy client they rescued proved to actually be Dr. Eggman at the end, and this is where Charmy beats him up because he didn't pay them, and that's how the Team Chaotix story ends. So if you beat all the special levels, which I thought were really good and challenging, to get all the 7 Chaos Emeralds, you unlock the last story after beating all 4 campaigns. It continues based off the ending of the Chaotix story. The Chaotix are questioning Eggman, asking why he hired them, and who is responsible for trying to take over the world. It cuts over to all the teams watching Neo, Metal, Sonic, who followed all of them and copied all their data, transforming into a powerful robot dragon looking thing that looks super badass and scary. I'm not gonna lie, when I watched this happen as a kid, I thought it was the coolest thing ever. Team Sonic decides to fight Metal Sonic with all the Chaos Emeralds they have, but needs the other 3 teams to buy them time. All 3 teams fight the Metal Madness boss, which is his transformation, and they take turns buying time for Team Sonic, who gets ready to fight for the grand finale. After defeating Metal Madness, Team Sonic transforms using the Chaos Emeralds, where Super Sonic helps Knuckles and Tails gain superpowers as well. The final boss plays a dope Crush 40 song, and they defeat the Metal Overlord. All is well, the day is saved, and the 4 teams go their separate ways, and that's the ending story of Sonic Heroes. So yeah, I think the plot is pretty decent. I mean, it isn't a deep or intricate story, but it is at least self-aware enough to not completely clown on itself the entire time, like a Sonic Colors or Sonic Lost World. It doesn't have cheesy, fake, meta-era 4-year-old jokes, and all the characters take themselves seriously. Sonic is as cool as ever in this game without needing a deep plot like any of the adventure games or 06. I think the storytelling like this is fine, although I do prefer the more epic, deep stories. This game has still some of its moments of that epic feel, but obviously it's not really the story that I 100% prefer. When the heroes do work together at the end to defeat Metal Sonic, it does feel like the stakes are high, which is actually what I really do like to see no matter what. So yeah, if you do want to go with the non-serious storytelling, I think this is the way to do it correctly. It doesn't overshadow any of the other elements of the game or make it feel corny. By the end of this game, you really feel like you got to give it your all for one last battle to save everyone, and we all love a supersonic boss fight, so there's no complaints for me. So as I revisit this game, and even growing up, I thought this was a fine plot and it did all the characters justice, which is more to be said than the current era of storytelling for this franchise. So yeah, you guys just watched the entire story of the game, so now let's get into why I think this game is actually really good aside from the storytelling elements, which is really actually the weaker points of the game, even though I just gave it a glowing review. There are 3 playable characters that you can switch from at the press of a button that are necessary in certain platforming situations. For example, if you need to go up higher or platform slower, you will switch to the flying character. If you need to break down rocks or obstacles, or be more combat focused, you will switch to the power character. If you are traversing through long linear paths or need to use the homing attacks to traverse across platforms, you will be the speed character. I will break down each playstyle individually later on. I think that they really do work seamlessly as a trio because it feels really satisfying to switch through the playstyles for certain objectives. It also harps back to the classics in a way because there's different playstyles that can help you traverse through hidden paths, and depending on which one you want to go with, there's different rewards and shortcuts for each way. Anyways, let's break down some of the core gameplay elements, and we'll start with the speed characters. If you guys were able to take a wild guess, obviously the speed character is the fastest player in the team. When moving around in long linear paths, you're going to want to play as this character. The speed character plays most similarly to Sonic or Shadow in the adventure games. The goal of the game in general is to get through the level as fast as possible while platforming, defeating enemies, collecting rings, power-ups, and making sure to rack up as much points as possible while doing tricks and completing the level flawlessly to get the highest rank. My personal favorite playstyle is running around as the speed character because you just get kind of a rush from being able to switch to Sonic and just zoom through the zone because his acceleration is probably the fastest he goes in any 3D mainline title that doesn't feature the boost. The speed characters have a pretty fun moveset. Your main attack will be the homing attack, which is standard to all Sonic games that he's appeared in. The homing attack is one of my favorite abilities in any 3D Sonic game, and it's actually really responsive and controls very accurately in Heroes. Another new ability, which is basically the new spin dash, is the Rocket Excel. Now, the introduction of this ability brings up an interesting point about the way this game was designed. Everyone knows how amazing the spin dash was in SA1 and even SA2 because it was used to manipulate the level design in any way that you can discover, which kind of opens up a rabbit holes for players to fall into. The Rocket Excel is a similar concept to the spin dash, but functions very differently and serves a very different purpose. While the Rocket Excel works like the spin dash was intended to, it is very spotty and more difficult to pull off successfully. When both of your teammates are behind you, you will roll into a ball and an aura will burst around you as you hit max speed and gain a lot of momentum like a spin dash. It is extremely satisfying to use and can really get you into a good flow if you do it at the right time. This goes to show how this game is different from the adventure formula because the abilities in different playstyles work together perfectly when they're used properly. And a lot of people have criticized this game because it's not like SA1 or SA2, but this game was designed with a certain playstyle in mind and it does it very well. If you modded SA2 with SA2 physics into the heroes level, which I've seen on YouTube before, it's very boring and linear. It's like a literal snooze fest and honestly looks terrible. That's why I don't co-sign the criticism of the quote-unquote slippery gameplay for the speed characters. It shows that they really took the gameplay styles into consideration when designing these levels that have similar objectives to the adventure games but with a new twist. And yes, I love the OG spin dash from SA1 the best, but this game does take a new twist on it and it does it well based off of the level design. Just because the speed characters don't control the same as the adventure games doesn't mean that you cannot get a similar level of control when using all 3 player characters as intended. But I'll cover that a little bit later, so we'll get back to the other abilities. Another speed ability is the tornado attack. This is an okay ability that is used mainly to do some pole platforming and go to a higher level. This can also be manipulated in a fun way as well though. You can use this attack to jump higher and even use a homing attack on enemies too high to reach normally. It's a cool ability and has some minor utility, which I don't think really hurts the gameplay. It's a little bit of a pace breaker, but nothing detrimental to the gameplay. Another attack that returns is the Lightspeed Dash, which is in SA1 and SA2, and it's basically the same as we've always seen it, and it's pretty responsive, so I don't really have any complaints about that. Overall, the speed gameplay is very similar to what we're accustomed to in the previous Sonic titles, but relies a little bit less on physics and momentum-based gameplay, and perfectly integrates the gameplay style into the level design. It has its own little fun twist on how you can play as Sonic, and I can't really be mad at them for trying to do something new at the time. The new mechanics work perfectly for the way that they were intended to be implemented. The critics say it gets a little slippery when platforming, and it's really tight at times, but it really never bothered me either way. Like I said, this game is not trying to be any of the adventure games. If you combine the fluidness of how all three playstyles work together when completing a level, I'd argue that it controls just as fine as the adventure games do. This game has designed its levels to take full advantage of all the characters' abilities and does so fantastically. But either way, let's move on to the second gameplay style. The second gameplay style is the flight style. This is used for Tails, Rouge, Charmy, and Cream. This is a gameplay style you will primarily switch to in platforming scenarios where you need to fly to a higher level. It is also useful for slowing down and having the best level of control for your team. When switching to a flight character, your team will form like a totem pole where everyone is holding underneath the flight character. From there, you can fly upwards for a certain amount of time as long as your energy bar holds up. The main problem with this is that it runs out pretty quick, and when you run out, you don't slowly descend like in SA1, you straight up fall like you have rocks tied to your feet. I don't really love that, but I think when used correctly, it gets the job done fine. You will also have access to an ability called the Thunder Shoot. This is a very satisfying ability that shoots one of your teammates outwards and accurately towards enemies and objects. When collecting level ups, it ends up one-shotting them instead of stunning them like it does at level 1, which is very cool and satisfying. I personally love using this ability the most out of all the flying character abilities. It is very fun to mess around with and makes the controls very fluid when used in transition. Overall, the flight gameplay is lacking in really anything else other than small levels of utility and forced upward platforming. The most important thing this gameplay style does is it actually helps stabilize you when you need extremely precise controls. I think overall it is a fine gameplay style that doesn't intrude on the fun of the game and actually helps out a little bit. So we'll move on to the last gameplay style, which is the power character. This character is one of the most combat focused out of the three. This is where you will play as Omega, Knuckles, Vector, or Big the Cat. Like the flying character, you are much slower in this formation and it will help you be a little bit more precise with your platforming. It doesn't give you quite as much control because you can't fly. When you're in this formation, you have access to a few abilities. You will mainly play this style when you're taking out big objects that stand in the way of your team or when you're in combat. You can punch forward using your allies as weapons, and you can also launch them accurately towards enemies in midair, and I think it's one of the funnest ways to take them out. If you use the combo 3 times on the ground, you will perform your power attack. This is very good for when you need to take out multiple enemies at once easily. Sonic Heroes is very different than other Sonic games because it has a health bar when you're in combat, so that makes it actually a lot more focused on combat itself. This system is extremely satisfying, and some people don't really like it, but I don't really see how that's possible. You literally have so many options for taking out enemies, so you can really play this game how you see fit. Any game that gives characters the freedom to be creative with how they play is always something I find extremely appealing. The next ability you have is a triangle dive. It is another situational based platforming ability where 3 characters form a triangle and use the power character's ability to glide upwards. I think it's pretty cool to use, and it doesn't really have much more utility than that. Overall, I find this whole gameplay style to be somewhat pace-breaking at times, but it really does make up for it with the increased precision and a very satisfying combat system. So let's give you guys my final thoughts on this game. Overall, this game just feels really good to play and has a lot of similar elements to the adventure playstyle, just with its own twist. I think they designed the levels perfectly to take advantage of the team system, and it maximizes everything that they can get out of this gameplay style despite mostly linear levels. As stated a few times, this game knows exactly what it's trying to do, and it only works because they made sure to go in a very specific direction with the gameplay and level designs. I have watched multiple people review this game over the years, so I feel like I have a really good idea as to what the general perception of this game is. As I said before, one of the biggest complaints is the slippery controls, claiming the speed characters move too fast. And while yes, it wasn't as crisp and smooth as the adventure games, which is something we could probably all agree on, it still handled very well overall. I really don't think it's a game breaker, and I also don't think it was as bad as people describe when watching a lot of the reviews that were just straight up bashing it. There's parts where the speed characters don't platform well, but that's fine. You can easily switch to the flying characters to slow it down and make it more precise. It's not perfect, but I think it works just fine. I mean, I really thought all of the characters control pretty decently overall though. Some people don't like the gimmick of switching between characters, but I thought it was a fine mechanic. After all, it's so cool to be able to play as Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles all at the same time. They're the most iconic video game trio of all time, so it's only right that you can do that. I also love that this game is actually a 3D Sonic game, which has almost been impossible to find in recent years. It definitely controls better than any of the boosting games, and I can only find praise for the fact that it doesn't shove 2D sections down our throats. Now, I'm probably going to be really controversial here, but I think this game is better than all of the boosting games except for Unleashed. Keep in mind this is my opinion, but I really want to know what you guys think down below. This game gives us the proper tone for a Sonic game that satisfies people who don't like stories in these games and people who do. Most importantly, it gives us a memorable gameplay experience that is far more in depth than any game in the last 10 years. I don't rank this game ahead of SA1 or 2, probably because I love those games so much growing up for a lot of other reasons, but this is my retrospective as why I think Sonic Heroes is an underrated gem. please get at me in the comments down below, and make sure to check me in my social media pages in the description. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. Until next time.